Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. Today, I have something amazing for you. You're absolutely going to love this. I think it's very applicable for everyone, male and female. I think it's applicable not only for people who are going through difficult times, but people who are just contemplating, what does my life look like in the future? The other thing that I think is so valuable in this particular podcast is that don't we all feel at times, I wish I knew how to support. I wish I knew how to be there for this friend of mine, and we struggle. Can I just tell you how many times on my social media when I feel something from someone and I really want to respond, but it seems so trite just to say, I see you. It seems so small just to say, I'm sending healing energy. My prayers are with you. Really, how can we be of support to people who are struggling and right in the middle of the struggle? It's one thing to help people who are after the struggle and really even before the struggle. But when we're right in the middle, like, how in the heck do we do that? And more importantly, how do we support and help ourselves? So to that end, today we have my good friend. Welcome, Carrie Hill.
Hi, Mary. Thank you so much for having me.
Carrie, I don't even know how to begin to describe you and who you are. You are this force that is really everywhere right now. But I didn't know you before. I've only known you about 6 months, right?
Yeah.
And it was just like all of a sudden you just popped up. And I'm like, how come I haven't known this person for years? And why hasn't she been in my circle? I don't know why. So let's start with that. Let's start with who you are, where you have been, and why now you are just everywhere. I mean, inquiring minds want to know.
Okay, let's do the inquiry. So, thank you so much. I am so humbled to know you. You were actually a person that I had heard in the ethers that I needed to know. And so you were actually one of the very first women that I reached out to when I decided to make a big splash on the scene. And I didn't even realize I was doing that. So I just wanted to know you. I had heard about your force and your energy in the world and some of your experiences. And so I reached out to you because I felt connected before I even knew you.
Absolutely. And from that first moment, I think we met at Silicon Slopes, the mental health town halls, with Promise to Live and Brandy Vega. I think that's where we met, right?
Yeah, I think actually we went to lunch before that. I connected with you on LinkedIn.
Okay, so we went to lunch before.
Met for lunch. Yeah.
I didn't know if we had went to lunch after or before. Okay, so it was before. Yeah. And you know me, I'm just kind of this open book person. When someone reached out to me as sincerely as you did, and I read about your profile on LinkedIn, I thought, now there's a woman I want to know. And so in my usual show up manner, I just said, yes, let's do this. And we did. And we were like instant friends.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yes. Yeah. I really appreciated your welcoming attitude toward me, Mary. And I think as we sat there and I listened more and more to your experience personally, but also the experiences of other women in your community that you have spent so much time trying to help, I just knew that you were going to be a person that would be key in what I wanted to do in the world. And I hope that is we have a reciprocity in that space.
Absolutely.
That we can be champions of each other.
Well, and obviously now I follow you. I follow you on LinkedIn. I follow you on social media. I love everything you're doing. And one of the things that I really like about you, Carrie, is sometimes when I post, I really walk into the depth of a topic. And yet I'm always aware of that. Not everyone wants to read an essay every time I post. And John actually says to me, do people actually read those? I go, well, some people read them. Yes. But you have no fear. You step into what you have to say, and you don't think about, is this going to be too long? Is this like interesting to everyone? You just go right to the depths with your heart and what your knowledge is, and you blend the two together so well, your heart and your mind. And you do that thing that I warn people about. Be careful about your gut, because it is full of fear, and you'll call it out. You're very vulnerable. I guess I really like you.
Well, that works out really well. I like you
Okay,
too.
good. All right. So you stepped onto the scene. We began to be, and like,
Yeah.
where were you before you stepped onto the scene?
Yes, I apologize. I got caught up in my admiration for you and kind of dodged the question. But I have been here for about 10 years, Mary, in this state. And
Huh.
you know my personal story,
Yep.
and so I can just share a little bit high level because that will give some context for how I came to be in this moment. I moved here from the East Coast with my spouse, who was at the time struggling with some mental health challenges. And I thought moving from the East to the West would lower stress and maybe elevate the quality of life and give him an opportunity to heal. His family moved out here. And so I felt like this was the natural transition. So we sold our lovely, beautiful home that we were going to live in forever, and we moved out here. And over the course of the first few years that we were here, unfortunately, the mental health challenges continued to be unaddressed. And with that came a host of things, as you know, because we've talked. But one of those things was unemployment and withdrawal, solitude, just a lowered interest in living life. And so you can only do those things for so long as an individual, but as a couple, it's really hard to sustain that when it's just one individual continuously trying to pull, the ox out of the mire, if you will. And so I really went into some serious financial crisis in that situation. And I realized I was going to become the sole financial provider of my family. And so even as a married individual, I was very much single in my life. And I had to file for bankruptcy and go through the whole, kit and caboodle of hitting kind of that financial rock bottom. And I was on welfare for a short time as I struggled to find full-time work. I had been out of the workforce, the corporate workspace, for about 15, 16 years. And fortunately for me, which is something I'd love to talk to you about, is this little part of my journey. But fortunately for me, I had created some contract work as a publicist for personal brands. And I just happened into that space by leaning into my soft skills, which were, I love people and I love storytelling. And so there's a little journey there. But lucky for me, that path gave me some resume builders.
Right.
And so I was able to find a job. I was on welfare for about 6 months, and then I was able to find full-time work and bring my family up out of that space for a little while. And unfortunately, my relationship ended in divorce, but the lessons that I learned from this whole experience have just really given me a layer of depth and richness and empathy that I didn't have before. And so, I just decided this year, I need to be, well, I shouldn't say I just decided, because when I was on welfare, I made a commitment to myself that if I ever got to a place that I felt stable enough financially and emotionally, that I would create something to help other women that were in my circumstances. And the lessons I learned from that journey are really valuable for people that are struggling and women that are they find themselves married for 23, 25 years, and all of a sudden
28
they're
years. Yeah.
right. Yeah. And then you find yourself having to reinvent the wheel, and you're right in the middle of the teenage years and the transitions and the most expensive time in life. And so this year, I just made a commitment. I am doing this year. And I just, like you said, leaned into that space and said, here I am. I'm not going to hide anymore and wonder who I am. And I'm putting my whole self out there. And I'm going to do the best I can to help other women and men in that circumstance as well. And so that's where you find me.
Well, and you literally did burst onto the scene. And suddenly, everyone knew you. And I think that that's such an interesting thing I'd like to touch on briefly. There must have been times, Carrie, as you were thinking about and visualizing what that looked like, how you were going to do it. I just know people well enough to know that there was a point when there was so much fear. That there was that piece where like, yes, I've got this. I think I'm going to burst onto the scene. But what if I fail? I mean, all those kind of things, what I mean? That we are telling ourselves all the big visualization, big talk, but still there's this little piece that says, you might not make this, How did you step through those fears?
Oh, I think I still have them every day, right? I think for me, it is, we talk a lot about imposter syndrome and wondering if we're good enough or big enough, or if we're saying the right things and if anybody cares, and do we have enough experience to be relevant in the world? And I just have decided that I am not going to subscribe to that. I am strong in the experiences that I have had, and the right people that need the information that I can share will come into my space organically, because the energy is authentic. In my opinion, I feel very authentic, and I feel that genuine authenticity comes through, and people are attracted to that.
Absolutely.
And so I think when you're really grounded in who you are, it's less about fear and more about refining who you are and the message.
Yeah. So it's kind of like accepting that we all have fears, but that's okay because we all have them. But you choose today to step in and walk through those fears. I always, people ask me, well, how did you ever move from fear-based living to love-based living? One step at a time. You just step in and you look and like, okay, I'm going to make this one step. And then you make another step, another step.
Yeah. And I'm still making those steps, right, Mary? I don't think it ever stops, right? It's like you get to a new level or a new place and you have to figure out how to navigate this space, and so every day it is a little bit different, even though it's the same.
Yeah.
I think something else too, and I know that you can relate to this, there is, when you have experienced that deep, threatening survival mentality where it is truly fight or flight, you don't realize how strong you are becoming through that process. And I think when you are facing the ultimate fear of potentially losing everything in your life, including your home and your safety, you tend to toughen a little bit, right? And you numb out, I think, a little bit of that survival panic because you have to move forward. And so I think that's also a contributor to where I'm at right now in my life, is that if I was able to get through that, I'm going to be okay no matter what's coming.
I couldn't agree more. Carrie, I want to delve in for just a little bit into what you're doing right now and the big piece I mean, I'm talking about big piece that you
Yeah.
are launching. So you sent
Yes.
me an email this morning, I think. Yeah, early this
Mm-hmm.
morning. I was so touched by this email. So I'm actually going to share a little bit of it with your permission with our listeners, because your hashtag, how people can follow you, and all of the links for your new book and how to follow you and your website are all going to be on this podcast at the end. So people can just like, wow, how do I get to know her better? Well, their links are all there. But your hashtag is Stop Divorce Poverty. Now, how
Mm-hmm.
huge is that? So many women live
I
in
think.
that fear of like, well, I don't know how I'm going to support myself, or how would I have enough, I have half the income in our family, but how would I pay for this house? How would I stay here? Do I
Mm-hmm.
have to leave? What about my children? What about, like, he does help and take them to part of their soccer games. Who will help me with that? I will be all alone.
Mm-hmm.
Will my children fall through the cracks? And will I have the money to keep them in the activities that they want? And what, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
all of that seems so overwhelming as women think about making this step. And that's what you're all about. You are offering this
Yeah.
helping hand to women, that there's a way. And let's talk about it. I love that.
Yeah.
So on
Thank
this
you.
email, I'm just going to read this. So hang on. Okay. Good
Okay.
morning. Excited to chat with you. Blah, 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 blah. And it said, then it went on to say, the ebook that you're publishing today. And I was like, today? She's launching this today? And usually I'm 4 weeks out in putting out my podcast, but I told my producer, I need her podcast up this week. Okay. Because I want everyone to know what you're doing. And it's called Impowered. I love that. But
Yes.
then you went on to say this part that stopped me in my tracks.
Mhm.
It is a guide for navigating a spouse's mental health. And it nearly took my breath away. I thought, what if I had had a guide to navigate
Mm.
my spouse's mental health? I didn't have that. And then it goes on. You said, how to prepare for divorce. You mean you prepare? You're not just
Mhm.
all of a sudden like, this is it, I'm just doing this, you know. And what is the preparation look like for that? And then where to go for professional and personal resources. You mean there are resources? I don't have to do this all on my own? How to find support when rebuilding. Carrie, those are the exact things that I personally wondered, that I didn't know how to navigate. That at the time, my friend group was very much my neighborhood and my church group. And suddenly I was no longer embraced by that group. So where is my support group?
Mm.
And no one came to see me. No one really asked how I was doing. It took the kind of resilience that I didn't know I had. In fact, now that I call it just downright grit. You just put
Mhm.
your nose on that grindstone and leave it there
That's
till it's a bloody mess. And then you get to take it off and go, okay, I made that. Thank you. But you
That's
don't
right.
have to do it that way. You
No.
can have love and support and energy around you. So I just want you to tell me all about your ebook and what's in
Okay.
it, and just like, you're like a warm blanket that's going to wrap around women and
Oh,
just hold
partner.
them. I love it. So it's yours. Tell us.
Okay. Well, I love that description. I think I'm going to add a little tagline, hashtag warm blanket.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. You know, about 3 months ago, I launched the Stop Divorce Driven Poverty Instagram. And I think you were one of the first people
Absolutely.
to support me in that. And so that title is really significant to me because that is what I experienced. It was divorce driven. There was no other reason outside of becoming a single parent and having to navigate the world entirely on my own while trying to raise my kids, while trying to figure out how to pay rent, buy food, pay bills, and so many women have littles. They have littles and they're trying to navigate this. And who's childcare? And if you don't have family, who's taking care of that? And what are your opportunities? And so, my experience on welfare was unique. Mary, I'll share this very personal experience with you, which I think I shared with you earlier, but I'd like for other women to hear this because I think it's really powerful. I really had a divine spiritual experience, if you will, with our state welfare office of all places. But when I went to apply for welfare, and any women that are in this situation, I hope that this brings you some hope, some light. I really could not even get the words out on the phone to start the process of applying for welfare. I just couldn't believe that I was in this situation. I'm a driven, motivated woman. I'm a good mom. I'm full of energy. And it just seemed so opposite of who I was to be in this situation and have to lean on our government, if you will, for support. And so it just felt anti-Carrie.
So what did you feel that said about you? Well,
yeah, I think I really felt that I had failed in some capacity, that if dad was going to go through what dad was going through, mom should be able to pick up the slack and make that, that financial commitment and be able to fulfill that. And I think we have very high expectations of ourselves as women and mom, especially motivated, dedicated, committed women who are mothers. We hold ourselves to a higher standard. And I think in this situation, I was holding myself to this heightened standard. And the reality was I couldn't. I needed this help. And so when I made this phone call and I couldn't talk, the lady on the caseworker on the other line, which normally they just ask you for your case number, there was a pause between me trying to get a word out and her responding. And she said, Miss Hill, and they never call you by your first name, Miss Hill, I need for you to know that even though this is hard for you, God wants you to take care of your family. And that's what we're going to do today. And I was in tears, I needed that strength, that commitment, just that one push was what I needed to be able to go through with that process. And so that was my experience, and I share it freely because I want other women in this situation to know that it is a gift. It is a gift. It is a very short-term, meant to be short-term gift. It's not a lot, but it's something to help. And I think that is the most important focus of our welfare system. And on the other side of that, Mary, what I learned is how challenging and broken our system is, especially when it comes to single divorced women who are in financial hardship. The welfare system is, it's on a sliding scale. And so for me, for the family of 5, I could not have any more than $2,000 in my bank account. And my monthly check was about $2,000. So if I made over that, because I was now gainfully employed, maybe only making $2,000, I would lose that benefit. And now I'm still behind. Right. And so the challenge of that, what I learned through that process is that this is why we stay in a cyclical space in welfare. It's very challenging to make that jump from $2,000 a month to $5,000 a month, which is what, I'm sorry to say, but that's about what we need every month to pay for the bills and the kids and rent or mortgage, And so it's a really challenging bridge to gap. And I wanted to solve for that gap. And so this hashtag Stop Divorce Driven Poverty is, it's an outcome of the program that I am building with my partner, Terry Lyman, who I think you also know.
I love Terry to the moon and back. He is a soul-based man. I'll tell you what. One of the few men that I think that I know at that level of understanding and depth.
Yeah. He has an enormous heart. And I actually just met Terry last year at Tribe House, and we sat across from each other, and I had just put a LinkedIn intention on my profile that day that said, I help women in need, children in need, and I work with mental health and veterans because my dad was a veteran. And those were things that were really important to me. And when I sat across from Terry last year, he said, you work with women. And I said, I totally do. and he said, I want to talk to you. And so afterward, he came up and said, I have this idea based on my own personal divorce experience of putting a program together to help women get back into the workforce with a full, gainfully employed. And I thought, I have had that same passion for 3 years. And within an hour and a half, we really had just said, okay, we're doing this. And we started to build the frame of this program that we're continuously working on and refining. And so the program is called Impowered. And it is.
And I want to make sure that we spell that for people, because it's not empowered, EM, but it's Impowered,
right.
I-M.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's empowered, because, to be empowered means that somebody's just said, here's all the resources, go do your thing. That's in my definition. But being in power of your choices and your life and your decisions is a totally different feeling. Yeah. And so we wanted to name this program Impowered. So the frame for this program, Mary, which is had a couple of evolutions and it's still being refined, but we are working with a fantastic university to push this forward. And the idea is to offer 8 weeks of courses that can be credentialed through this university. And I'm not able to say the name yet because it's not 100% signed.
Good to know, because I was just ready to burst out with the name. So thank you.
Yes, it's coming. But the idea is to help women who have been out of the workforce with limited skills learn some actual skills that are marketable, such as Canva, project management skills like Google Suite or HubSpot, things that are that have value to employers. And so once they go through this program and they're credentialed, the idea is then we work with companies who are partnering with us to place these women in a job so that they can have some sustainable income and some benefits. Because as you know, when you're a mom with no health benefits for your children, in the event that your spouse does not have insurance either, that in and of itself is a quality of life issue. And what we see is this generational poverty, lack of health care. Now we get into mental health problems. Now we get into potential addictions, crime. I mean, the cycle starts with not being able to bridge that gap between welfare and work. And a lot of women in that space just give up and say, I don't know how I'm going to do it. And so this is where we are.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
And so my calling, if you will, what I feel compelled to do is solve for this, and not just for women here locally, but the big picture is that we create something that is relevant in every market, in every state, for women that are struggling. Because when our women are not able to nurture society, Mary, society starts to slide terribly off a cliff. And we are seeing more and more and more of that lack of connection, lack of healthy relationships in our families. We're seeing more, just all kinds of things right now, because there's a good amount of moms who aren't able to nurture their children the way that they would like to.
Yeah.
And so it's so much bigger than just the financial piece, right? So
It is a lot bigger than just that financial piece, but the financial piece is huge.
Huge.
Now, my situation was a little bit different than that, because I had been the breadwinner for a long time. I had long since known that this was not something he was going to be able to do and provide for me. My dream had been to be a stay-at-home mom and to just take care of my children, just the way my mom had done in the 50s, and to come to the realization of that was not going to be my life. Now, as I look back on that, I am so grateful for the opportunity I had to discover who I am and to heal. Not every woman feels that she has that position to stand on her own financially. That wasn't one of my fears. But I stayed because of my fear of not being enough. And I was told you'd never be able to have anyone else. You better stick with me, those kinds of things. And that fear inside of me that I was not enough and I never would find the companionship that I sought. And so sometimes it's not just financial poverty, it's emotional poverty. And you get to the point where you say, you know what? I'm going to risk it anyway. I'm going to step into that being empowered. And I think that that's one of the great things that you're offering, Carrie, is you're offering a support and a path and information to women who are struggling with, how am I going to support and meet all the financial needs? But you also have that piece of support for people and women who, you know what, I have a job. A lot of these women are the breadwinners. They already are supporting their families, but they stay because of the fear of what it would mean and what it would say about them if they left, which is a whole different piece. So, Carrie, I'd like to just spend a brief moment on that particular piece, that giving permission to women to be their own light and the courage to step in.
I love that you said that, to be your own light. You know, I think being enmeshed in that kind of environment where it really is so scary to think about stepping away and having to take on all the things, by yourself. And you're right. You know, you mentioned earlier, well, maybe he's not doing these things, but at least there's some help in driving to soccer, or right. And that's real help. That is a real help. But I think for me, Mary, I knew that if I continued to stay in an emotional space, that I was constantly had this pit in my stomach about not just what am I going to do, but I am alone in this relationship.
Yeah.
And I no longer want to be alone in a relationship. And if I'm going to choose that, then I'm going to step away from the relationship because it's the healthiest thing for me, and to show up in the world the way that I knew that I could and can, and to show up for my children the way that I wanted to, I knew that we had just come to a point where the separation was necessary for everybody. And so I think what I would say to women in that situation is that you are your own light. You absolutely deserve to be in a space where you can thrive. And if you are not thriving, perhaps this is not the best place for you to be. And it's not even about being alone. It's about, is this healthy for me as a human? And if it's not healthy, then why would I stay?
But to be honest with you, there are so many women, there are so many reasons to stay that we don't understand all of them. But there is this sense of, as you can imagine, at my age now, and it's been 16 years since I divorced. How many women have said to me, I just can't leave? And I'm always like, what does that mean? You just can't leave. And I hear things like, I've decided that it's okay, that I can, and this is the worst word I've ever heard, that I can settle for this because of my family. I don't want to break apart my family. I can just settle for this unhappiness. I don't have to be happy. I can settle. And the community won't know how to interact with me if I divorce. And so they just really, this word, they embrace it like it's a badge of honor, a martyr, that I'm settling for the sake of my family.
Yeah. But I think that comes back, Mary, to that fear that you were talking about earlier. It's like, it's just the fear of being, let me tell you, my number one fear when I got married was that I would have to be in a position to support my family by myself at some point. That was my fear. And
then you
I manifested, you know, and I think, and I stayed for a long time because there is this element of saying, I have to do everything that I can do before I can leave, because when I walk away, I need to know that I gave everything I could, because that is healing in and of itself. And that gives you confidence to take on the next chapter. And so that's why in this ebook that we're talking about, I listed a path. Like, here's a checklist of things that if you are thinking that you are at the tail end of being able to give everything that you can and you're ready to make that transition. And I'm not pro and I'm not against. I'm just offering helpful, resources. But this was my checklist, and this is what I did to get myself ready to move into a different space. And so I've shared that with women so that they don't have to find it and go a million places online to figure out what needs to be done first. And so these are very actionable things that you can say, okay, for the next 2 months, I'm going to go through this checklist and just do one of these things, every day, every other day, until you feel like you're in a good place. And then you can move on to the next thing. And so I needed a blueprint, and I spent a lot of time in that space saying, I'm not financially stable right now. I can't just leave in this moment. I need to build myself up a little bit before I can take off on my own. And so this ebook is really about that journey. And who do you go to? Where are the jobs? Where are the resources? Where are the women who understand your story? And so I think that was a big part of wanting to get this ebook up and ready for this interview today.
Well, I just let out this huge sigh of relief that you have an ebook and sources for people to actually give them strength. Let me rephrase that, to help them find their strength and begin to move. Carrie, how do people find this book? How can we engage with this?
Yes, thank you for asking. Well, it will be here on your podcast, but I also have it on my website, which you can see on my LinkedIn profile. And my LinkedIn profile is just Chill Consulting Agency. And you can see everything that I do in terms of public relations. And then there's also a section for speaking about this topic. And I just put the ebook up today.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so honored to have you launch this today of your podcast. That's incredible. Thank you.
I could not be more grateful. I was so excited to share it with you because I just knew that you would get it. And
yeah,
so
I get it. And I want to support you. I want this with all my listeners. They mean so much to me, as you do.
Yeah. Well, you mean so much to us. Yeah. So thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Ladies, women, men. Wouldn't this be a great book for men to look at? How they can support people who they know that are in this situation. And also it might be a huge wake up call to men in their current relationships of, wow, I really have not been able to do this. So please visit all of our links. There's so much here as we lift ourselves and lift others to crafting our meaningful life. Carrie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Crafting a Meaningful Life.